We talk about UFOs amongst ourselves, but what about the more influential, the singers, the actors, the politicians, the athletes? Have any of them ever spoken out publicly about seeing a UFO? Or at the very least, do they at all care about the UFO phenomenon? We will be looking at when the rich and famous have spoken out about their UFO sightings, either in writing or in a video format interview. I'm on a journey of discovery. I am seeking answers to some of the most challenging questions that face mankind, and many nuggets of knowledge that could bring those answers are unsolved cases and tales of the strange and unexplained. This show focuses on recounting cases and stories of unknown phenomena, mysterious events, weird places, and the unexpected. So please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on the people we are going to cover today. This show is going to be a different format as we are going to go through several categories. And the first category we're going to get into are the athletes. Take a guess on the first person that we're going to mention today. I'll give you a second. You thought of it? Okay. First person is Muhammad Ali. And what's really interesting about him, and I have a video that I'm going to be showing to you, but before we get there, he's mentioned before that he's had easily 16 UFO sightings in his lifetime. And he does an interview back in 1973 for the Budget Time Travel. And I really want you to listen to what he has to say. The person that's sitting next to him, his facial expressions, the host, and the audience. All of those factors are going to be very important for this clip I'm going to show you. And of course, it's always much better to hear the story from the person themselves versus me just reading to you what they said once. So let's go ahead and play that.
Before the next day, right?
I've been studying.
You seem quite reserved tonight. What?
I've been studying UFOs. Did you know there are UFOs out here flying around, unidentified?
This would be the place for them, Southern California.
I'm serious. They sighted a bunch over Georgia. I've seen them at night. They have real photos of them, and the government, the people just completely seem like don't talk about it. But Mr. Harold Salkin of Washington, D.C., is the head of the National UFO Bureau.
Right.
He brought me moving films. I actually have moving pictures of little saucers, of great still objects coming into pictures that people took, and I'm just surprised that don't nobody talk more about it. Something they can.
Another great insight into the fight game. I'm just kidding. No, I read that. But did you read the thing last night on the news?
No.
That some physicists said that what the people of Georgia might have seen were that there are probably several thousand satellite objects going around the United States, around the Earth, and sometimes they disintegrate and they come back into space.
Not 50 feet over the highway.
Well, it could. It's got to land somewhere.
No. They call it swamp gas, and some they don't want. I don't know what it is, but I think I do. But there are actual saucers and objects coming within our atmosphere and flying around, and people got pictures. Everybody cite the same thing in every city: the red and blue and green lights. But the authorities completely brush it off as if to say we are mentally off. But I know it's right because I've been seeing them.
Well, why don't they land then, Muhammad? I mean, if they're intelligent people, why wouldn't they land and step out and say, hi there? Or Galman Ding, whatever they say. You know, why wouldn't they make contact?
They probably figure they can't get no sense out of the people here. I'm serious. I'm not.
Well, I know you're serious in your belief. I don't happen to believe in it myself.
This is anybody who's got eyes believe.
Well, you can see a lot of things, but that doesn't always make them objects from other planets.
Much of that. What about the fight?
Okay, there's a lot to dissect from that one, but one of the main things is the person sitting next to him was like, oh no, Muhammad, please, please don't. But Muhammad's going for it. He's like, look, I've been researching UFOs. I've been looking into it. I know someone on the inside that's provided me photos and videos, and it's something that's so interesting to me. But you know what they're going to say? They're going to say it's swamp gas. Then you have the host for Budget Time Travel who was like, well, Southern California is the place to go see a UFO. And to be fair, he wasn't wrong. Okay, let's be honest. California is a bizarre hotspot when it comes to UFOs. But this took place in 1973. A lot of UFO sightings, a lot of alleged alien abductions were happening during that time frame between the 60s, 70s into the early 80s. It was just a hot time period. And for Muhammad Ali, one of the most influential athletes of all time to talk about it, it's shocking. It's shocking, but what's more shocking is how the audience and how the host reacted to it, and you could hear it. And for me, I cannot stand where you're like signed to laugh, like, okay, now laugh now, like for sitcoms and for these kinds of shows. It bothers me. Father Ted's an exception, but everywhere else I'm just like, let them laugh naturally if it's actually funny, okay? But that's just a side note. But looking at this, as soon as the word UFO left his lips, the audience is cackling. They're like, oh my God, this is so funny. And then you have the host trying to still be somewhat respectful to Muhammad, but it's like thinking to himself, this guy's out of his mind. And I believe your beliefs, or you can believe your beliefs. And he's like, and he ends it so beautifully. He says, it's not a belief, it's for anyone that has eyes. And I was thinking, that was so brilliantly said, especially for 1973. But there's more when it comes to Muhammad, because as I had mentioned right before showing that clip, he stated before that he's easily had about 16 sightings, mostly while training in the early morning in Kentucky. And I'm going to put this image back up. And so he also claimed that he saw a mothership as well. And he said, quote, if you look up in the sky in the early morning, you see them playing tag between the stars. Can we just take a second to think about that? Obviously, it cannot be Venus, it cannot be Jupiter. It shouldn't be swan gas, especially in Kentucky, but hey, I could be wrong there. Weather balloons, it's a bit difficult. Why? Because number one, he's saying that this has happened on many mornings in Kentucky, right when the sun's coming up, but you're still able to see the stars, but they're moving sporadically. It's difficult to explain it away so simply. But here's another one. He says, quote, the closest one happened when a cigar-shaped ship hovered briefly over a car I was a passenger in one night driving north on the New Jersey Turnpike. And what a sight it was. We could see the shadow made by the UFO as it passed over the pavement of the road in the light of the full moon. Before I could blink my eyes, the light had come down towards the mountains until it hovered right above the valley here. I knew I couldn't be dreaming. Sure enough, it was still there. This had to be one of those big ships they talk about. The UFO was streamlined and shaped sort of like a cigar, but blunt on both ends. I couldn't see any windows or anything, but I'm certain there must have been people on board. Now, when he is saying people, we can assume here it's extraterrestrial or non-human, because during that interview for the budget time travel in 1973, the host also said people when he was referring to aliens. And now aliens has become a more broader term over the last, I'm going to say, the last like 2 years. And I was talking to this with someone, I think it was like, I got a DM saying, not all aliens are extraterrestrial. And I'm like, no, you're absolutely right. Jacques Vallée was one of the first people to mention aliens could be interdimensional. And then in the last few years, we have Lou Elizondo, David Grush, and a few others that are saying, we're not necessarily dealing with extraterrestrial, but more of an interdimensional aspect. And this is really interesting because it's broadening our understanding of what alien means, what people are having interactions with, who are they, and we just can't place all of our eggs in one basket. So I just wanted to highlight on that. I think it's important. But for me, looking into this, I had no idea Muhammad Ali had UFO sightings. But not only that, he was very proud to talk about them. There are a few others that actually we're going to be covering today that sat on their sightings for years, if not decades, before coming out and sharing their experience with the world. But then you have Muhammad, one of the most influential athletes of all time, just laying it out how it is, and truly bizarre. And I'm going to be asking a question. I might ask it a few times, but I'm going to start it off today with our first one. And that is, we're going to be covering at least 10 to 15 rich and famous celebrities. Here's my question for you. Maybe you can answer it now. Maybe you got to sit on it until the end of the show, or maybe until next week. Why are they getting so much visitation? Why are so many celebrities being visited or are having UFO encounters? And a lot of them speak out about it. Not all of them. There's probably many that are still hiding in the closet when it comes to their UFO sighting, but a good chunk of people have come out at some point in the last few years, since 2017 onward, to be more exact, minus Muhammad Ali. But until 2017 onward, more celebrities are like, yeah, I had something happen to me. Yeah, I saw something really weird in the sky. And a pattern you're going to see is a lot of these celebrities saw strange things in deserts. Okay, just remember that. Okay, and every time you catch it, write it in the live chat, write it in the comments of, hey, I heard it. The celebrity saw it in the desert. I do want to see that one. Before we do that, I want to say hello to everyone catching this live. Hello, Raphael, No Filter, Paul, Jerry, Darkstar, All Work Low Pay, Bob, Tyler, Anthony. Buenos dias, as Anthony says. Buenos dias. Getting into our next one here. And this is for all of my NFL fans out there. The next we'll be talking about is Aaron Rodgers, and he was an NFL quarterback, and he had a sighting back in 2005 but didn't publicly speak about it until 2023. And this is according to the ESPN, because in the final season of Hard Knocks on HBO, Steve Levy was talking to Rogers and he said, "Hey, Rogers, tell the UFO sighting that we had back in 2005." Roger is getting kind of sweaty hands. He's moving them together and he's like, "You really want to do this?" And Levy's like, "Come on, come on. Everyone wants to hear this UFO sighting. Plus, UFOs are trending right now. It'll really do good stats for this episode of Hard Knocks. Go ahead and tell the story." So Roger sits back in his chair and he takes a really big, deep breath and he says, "All right, I'm going to tell this story." And here's what happened. Because during that captivating interview with his former college teammate, Steve Levy, Rogers recounted a remarkable UFO sighting they experienced together in 2005. So while staying at Levy's New Jersey home for the NFL draft, Rogers, Levy, and Levy's brother were drawn outside by some kind of distant alarm, only to witness a massive object traversing the sky, reminiscent of the scene from Independence Day. That was the first thing that went through Roger's mind when he was seeing this in the sky. He's like, let's go to my television knowledge. Oh my gosh, here's a comparison. Independence Day. So the group, they were stunned, so much so they didn't speak a word when they were observing this object. And then shortly before fighter jets appeared, seemingly in pursuit, they're seeing this object first, and then they're seeing military jets. Interesting. We've heard this 1,000 times. We've seen it with the Phoenix Lights in 1997. This case is no exception. So Rogers, and this is really interesting about Aaron Rodgers because he knows a little bit about UFOs. He understands in some ways the UFO phenomenon because the next comment he makes are only those that know anything about this topic. Because he mentioned and he thought to himself, you know what? We're kind of close to a nuclear plant, and there is a connection between UFOs and nukes. He said that in the episode of Hard Knocks. This blew my mind, and it demonstrates it doesn't matter your profession, doesn't matter your credentials. The UFO phenomenon is a sick topic to cover. It's awesome, it's fun, it's exciting, and it piques many people's curiosity. And even an NFL quarterback is doing the research behind the scenes to say, even though I saw something very weird in 2005 and didn't talk about it for decades, he still looked into it and he thought to himself, you know what, we're kind of close to a nuke plant. Maybe there's a connection there. What's also interesting with his sighting is that there were military jets that scrambled right behind this UFO, this object. So there could be a lot of things going through people's minds. Could it have been test like a black project? It's a possibility. Could it have been some kind of test flight? It's a possibility. Could there be a connection or some kind of cooperation between aliens and our government. Many people would say so. And I'm not going to tell you if that's true or not. That's up for you to decide. But with a lot of people that have encountered, have seen UFO sightings, military jets quickly scramble afterward. And the possibilities are endless onto why that is. So let me ask you, why do you think that's the case? Do you think it's just a casual coincidence? Is there some kind of cooperation? Are they just black projects? Let me know. I do truly want to understand where you're coming from. Now we are getting into our next one. And this one's funny, okay? Because we're talking about Shaquille O'Neal. He did an interview with Jimmy Kimmel back in 2021, so incredibly recently, of a sighting that he had back in 1997. Does that year ring a bell? Does that year sound interesting? If you are following this episode like a hawk, I just mentioned it when we're looking at the Phoenix Lights. And I'm not saying Shaquille O'Neal saw the Phoenix Lights, but it was the same year. Let's go ahead and play that interview.
Congratulations. I do want to ask you about the UFOs, 60 Minutes. Did you watch last night? Do you know what's going on?
1997, me and one of my good friends, Chris Flores, we were on a double date. The girl he married, her name was Melissa, her friend named Melissa. We were on a double date. We were coming from Hollywood Video in Madera, California. And right when we passed the fairground, by this big open lot, I could have swear I saw a flying saucer come down with all the lights, and it was spinning, and it just and took off, and everything happened in less than 5 seconds, and we all looked at each other, was like, and I know that it was a UFO. I don't care what anybody says.
You never told anybody about that?
Nope, you're the first person I told, because I don't want people to think I'm crazy. But
right.
But since I know you're crazy and you believe in UFOs, now it's time to let the world know that Shaq believes in UFOs.
That's insane. That's insane in so many ways. Hold on, let me just put that back. Okay, so he gave his testimony in 2021 on the Jimmy Kimmel episode where he says, look, you believe in UFOs, so it's okay for me to talk about it. If he was on someone else's show, maybe he wouldn't have mentioned it, but and I kind of cut it out just a little bit because it's a bit longer of an intro. But Jimmy Kimmel, as soon as Shaq gets on the show, he cuts the chase and he says, okay, it's 2021. Weird stuff is happening. We are seeing the AOI MSG report. It's really hitting the news hard. What do you think about UFOs? He didn't mention the AOI MSG. I'm just kind of filling it in because that's what was happening in 2021. And then like the UAPTF and stuff. And Shaq is like, okay, now it's time for me to tell my story. I made this particular interview into a shorter format video across social media platforms, and the comments were funny because people were saying the whoosh, whoosh, whoosh sound effects made the whole story legit. It's like, okay, if Shaq made those sound effects, you know it's a true story. And it's funny. And he is another person that is incredibly influential. Not only was he one of the, I would say, like one of the more famous basketball players of his time, but he's also an entrepreneur, a philanthropist. When you walk into Staples, you see ginormous cutouts of him. I mean, when you see his face, you know exactly who he is, even if you're living under a rock. Like, you know what's up. For him just to recently tell the story, I think it's interesting. And when we're looking at celebrities, the rich and the famous, they have some of the biggest platforms. They are bigger than any influencer that we could ever imagine. So when they talk out about a UFO encounter, about being interested in UFOs, it puts other people, it makes them jump into a rabbit hole, or it makes them feel comfortable to go ahead and say, maybe it's okay for me to talk about my UFO sighting. Maybe it's okay to think to myself, maybe I did see something weird that I simply couldn't explain. At the very least, you don't have to talk out about your sightings, but if you do, I do have a Discord server where it's a safe and friendly place for people to share their insights, their experiences, and more. That link is below. I know one of my amazing mods will share that link in the live chat. But you don't have to share your experiences. At the very least, when you just feel comfortable with the sighting that you had, it makes a big difference for the rest of your life. And a lot of these celebrities are insanely famous, more so than any YouTuber or TikToker or who knows what. These people have huge audiences. Next, we're moving over to our politicians, but you know what? More specifically, our presidents. Jimmy and I did a whole show on UFOs and presidents. It's a fantastic show. I highly recommend it because it's really interesting to see that from Jimmy Carter, um, Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, Obama, Clinton, Trump, even Biden. All of these presidents have been pushing to know about UFOs. A lot of them have a UFO interest. And then when they walk into the Pentagon, they're like, all right, give me the goods. Publicly, the presidents say, and they gave me nothing. I wasn't allowed to enter Area 51. They didn't tell me anything about Roswell. But consistently, for a good chunk of the United States presidents, they have walked in and they said, I want to know about UFOs. There have been some campaigns over the last decades. A good example of this is Bernie Sanders, who said, if I become president, I will disclose UFOs and the government research on UFOs. Trump has talked about that. Hillary Clinton has done that. There's a few other candidates in the past that I've kind of touched on that before. So there is this fascination, even when it comes to politicians and presidents in this case, that show this interest. So we're going to start off with Jimmy Carter, as we're seeing on screen right here, because in 1969, he believed that he witnessed a UFO, and his official report on the sighting was not filled until 1973. So we're looking at a 4-year gap, which isn't ideal. Hopefully, he had written down his encounter right after it happened, because kind of going from memory 4 years later, it's a bit of a toughie. But it was prompted by a request from the International UFO Bureau, which sent him a report form, which I think is really interesting. And the document, completed in Carter's handwriting while he was Georgia's governor, is preserved at the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library and Museum. And then there was also a similar document which responds typed, which exists within the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, also known as NICAP, which bears the same date of September 18th, 1973, the year that he wrote it down. But let's get into that sighting. What did he see in 1969? Are you excited? I'm excited for this one, because here's what happened. Because he reported observing a UFO in Leary, a small town in South Georgia, located about 90 minutes south of Columbia. And he noticed that his sighting was shared with 10 other individuals from the Georgia Lions Club. And the sighting, which occurred just right after dusk, so at around 7:15 p.m., they noticed this as they awaited the start of a meeting scheduled for 7:30 p.m., when this brightly illuminated object captured their attentions before cell phones. So no one's looking down the way that they do today. Now, in his reports, Carter remained uncertain about the nature of what he saw. He remained very skeptical, and he described witnessing a strange light that altered in size, brightness, and color over a span of 10 to 12 minutes. When you have, if you've ever had a UFO encounter, you're lucky to see it for a few seconds. In this case, for Carter to see it for 10, 12 minutes, and to be able to almost measure the brightness, the span of colors, and even the size, is truly remarkable. And what's important about his particular sighting that took place in, what did I say? 1969, is that this craft that him and 10 other people saw made no sound. Made no sound. How many times, someone tell me, how many times have we heard that before? Too many times to count. And Carter is no exception to this. So the object, according to Carter, was situated about 30 degrees above the horizon, comparable in size to the moon, but varying in appearance. What does that mean? Is he mentioning that it's some kind of shape-shifting craft? Or is it because the light was too bright and when it moves around, it looks like it's shape-shifting? doesn't really go into details on that. And at times, it seemed closer, possibly within 300 yards. And at other times, it appeared as far as 1,000 yards away. So 300 yards, a football field is 100 yards. So just three football fields, because we're in the States and we measure everything in football fields and in Walmarts. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of understanding of how far this object was from Carter, which in reality, 300 yards, it's pretty far. We're looking at a little under a mile. Because 4 laps, right? 400 yards is about a mile when you're running. Okay, sorry, that's such boring information, but some of my athletes will understand what I'm talking about. So this UFO exhibited self-illumination, displaying an initial bluish hue, then shifting to reddish, and appeared luminous yet not solid. This is a sick detail. And then Carter recounted how the object approached and then retreated, but then finally vanished after about 15 minutes. That's a good chunk of time to be able to gauge anything. Have it be you're watching animals in the forest play, have it be you're watching some kind of weird object in the sky. 15 minutes is a good amount of time, don't you think? For those that have had a UFO sighting, how long was yours? Was it a few seconds? Was it a few minutes? Was it even a few hours? Let me know down below. I would like to know about your sighting. Tyler says, like pure light or organic looking? This is a really awesome question because Carter mentions that it appeared luminous but not solid. The interpretations are endless with this, but we don't hear that too often with UFO sightings, especially when it's coming from credible people such as Carter right here. And so, could it have been organic, kind of like the Carlos Diaz lights? Possibly, possibly. I think it's interesting. Scientist says, I believe it. I don't see why not. I mean, all you can do is take this at face value with a grain of salt, but I cannot emphasize this enough that these people are influencing others to feel more comfortable with this topic because for the decades that it's been in people's eyes and minds has just been riddled with stigma. Too much. Now it's become easier. And being able to mention, hey, a lot of celebrities have spoken out about it, this will make people feel more comfortable. Next one is Mr. Ronald Reagan. And for those that don't know, for those outside of the United States, before Ronald Reagan was a president, the 40th president, he used to be a Hollywood actor and a California governor. Now, he had a sighting back in 1974. And what's interesting about his case is that there were several other witnesses with him. So there were 4 people aboard a plane with Ronald Reagan in it. One of them was pilot Bill Painter, 2 security guards, and Ronald Reagan. And as the airplane approached Bakersfield, California, the passengers called Painter's attention to a strange object to their rear. And it says, quote, it appeared to be several hundred yards away, according to Painter. And it continues. It was a fairly steady light until it began to accelerate. Then it appeared to elongate. Then the light just took off. It went up at a 45-degree angle at a high rate of speed, and everyone on the plane was surprised. The UFO went from a normal cruise speed to a fantastic speed instantly. And if you give any airplane power, it will accelerate, but not like a hot rod. And that's exactly what that UFO was like. Then, a week later, Reagan recounted the sighting to Norman C. Miller with the Washington bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal, and Reagan told Miller, quote, we followed it for several minutes. It was a bright white light. We followed it to Bakersfield, and then all of a sudden, to our utter amazement, it went straight up into the heavens. When Miller expressed some doubt, the journalist A look of horror came over Reagan because it suddenly dawned on him that he was talking to a reporter. So that sighting that he had, he could have told anyone, but he's like, you know what? Let me tell this to a reporter. And of course, it was very quickly published in newspapers across the country of, oh my gosh, listen to this. Ronald Reagan had a UFO sighting. Should we vote for him for president? That's not the actual headline, but that's probably what was going through Reagan's mind. Now, this took place when he was still a governor, but probably at that time he was considering running for president. So after that, once he realized who he was speaking to, Reagan very quickly clammed up and he stopped talking when Miller was attempting to get more information out of him, attempting to get more details of the sighting that he had back in 1974. But Reagan stopped right there. He's like, I had some loose lips, and loose lips sink ships. And he just stopped talking. He's like, I can't do this anymore. Now, out of those two presidents, let me ask you this. This is going to be an interesting question. Let's say these two presidents and maybe a bunch of other people were running for presidency, okay? But you knew that maybe 1, 2, or 3 of them had a UFO sighting. Do you think that would increase their chances of winning presidency? I know it's a superficial question. It shouldn't be about your experiences. It should be about how you can help a country. But sometimes, most of the time, people can be very superficial. So if you knew someone that you wanted, people that were running for presidency, and you knew one of them had a UFO sighting, do you think in your mind that you would vote for them because of that? And then maybe their political views might be a second reason why. It's a weird question, but it's a serious one. Please answer that. Raphael says, currently yes, and past no. P says, nope, it wouldn't increase their chances of winning the election. You're right. I mean, it didn't work with Bernie Sanders, who was really pushing for it and saying, if I become president, I will release UFO information. It didn't work for him. So I think he's a good example. Jam says, nope. Keith says, yes. Tony says, 10 years ago, no, but now, yes. Heck says, no, it wouldn't increase chances. I think some are saying yes and some are saying no. Rome says, I do. Hyde says, what would we do with an honest, transparent president? Serious question. When it comes to politicians, are they really ever that transparent? Okay, now we're getting into our actors here. And for this next one, I do have a video for you. And we're talking about Kurt Russell. And the year once again is popping up, and it's 1997. But this one is very specifically referring to the Phoenix Lights. He gave his testimony on the BBC back in April of 2017. Let's go ahead and play that.
Oliver and I were flying in. I was flying him to go see his girlfriend, and we were on approach. And I saw 6 lights over the airport in absolute uniform in a V shape. And Oliver said to me, I was just looking at him, and I was coming in. We're maybe a half a mile out, and Oliver said, "Pa, what are those lights?" And I then it kind of like came out of my reverie, and I said, "I don't know what they are." I said, he said, "Are we okay here?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna call him." And I reported it. And they said, "We're not painting anything. We don't show anything." I said, "Well, okay, I'm going to declare it's unidentified, it's flying, and it's 6 objects." Mm-hmm. We landed. I taxied, dropped him off, took off, went back to LA. Never said a word. He never said a word. I never thought of it. 2 years later, Goldie is watching a television show when I came home. Yeah. And the show is on UFOs. But as I came home, "Hey, honey, how's it going?" And I'm kind of hearing the TV going, and I stopped and I started watching, and it was on that event. Now that was the most viewed UFO event. Over 20,000 people saw that. And I'm watching this, and I'm feeling like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's like, why do I know this? You know what? And it's not clear to me. And finally, I said. Then they said the pilot reported it. A general aviation pilot reported it on landing. I'd never thought of it since then, and I said, "That was me. That was me." And I said, "Wait a minute. I'll go to my logbooks." So I went to my logbooks, and there was the flight at that time, and I didn't mention anything about the UFO. The fascinating part of that to me is that it just went literally out of my head.
Yeah.
And Oliver never mentioned it. And had I not seen that show, I'd have never thought of it again.
That's insane. That is seriously insane in so many ways. So number one, I love the fact that once again we are seeing a pop culture reference, and he mentions the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's a classic. Everyone in our world knows about it. And even the person sitting next to Kurt Russell, the guy from Guardians of the Galaxy, and his name escapes me, he was like, yeah, Close Encounters, like, I know that movie, duh. And so this demonstrates to the world how important pop culture is, because we're able to pull examples from that in order to convey what we encountered, our experiences and our encounters, better than maybe using language that people wouldn't fully understand. So our current understanding, our current environment, and our current knowledge really does affect how we convey that to people in general. And we've spoken about this in the UFO cases predating 1903, which is really important on how people in the past attempted to tell their UFO sightings to people with the language and the vocabulary and the inventions they used to have during that time frame. We're seeing it here today. Kurt Russell is an example of that. And I think it's fantastic. So that's one thing. Another thing that we're able to hear in a bit more detail of what was going through his mind back in 1997 when he was on a plane with his son. He calls air traffic control and he's like, "Hey, I'm seeing this weird thing." But then the crazy thing about this case, about this story, is that Kurt Russell forgot about his sighting, something that is so monumental in a lot of people's lives. He just forgot about it. And if his partner Goldie wasn't watching something to do about UFOs on the television, he might not have ever remembered. This is something that we can go into more detail on. I don't want to spend too much time, but let's just touch on it. People that have had alleged alien abductions, similar things happen to them where their memories are sealed. And then sometimes they'll just have this spontaneous moment on when they remember something because of a conversation, because of something that they saw casually in their day-to-day life. Who knows? Kurt encountered the exact same thing. Why? Why? And on top of that, out of the well, to be fair, okay, the Phoenix Lights is one of the biggest UFO sightings of all time. He mentioned about 20,000 people saw that. That's a range. We're looking at anywhere from 11 to like 20 or so thousand people. There isn't a really definite answer, but this is interesting that he mentioned this, and he didn't tell his story until about 2017. So he was sitting on this for 20 years. Crazy, don't you think? The next person we're going to talk about is his partner Goldie Hawn, she okay, so this is interesting about her because she had a sighting in the 70s, but she first spoke about it in 2023 in an episode of Apple Fitness's audio feature, Time to Walk. Why are celebrities deciding to speak about it now? And the theme that we're seeing here is that 27 onward, minus Muhammad Ali, okay, where he's an outlier, they're just now talking about it because just now people are seeing that it's more of a cool topic, less stigma than ever before. And Goldie's a really fantastic example of that, because she mentioned that in the 70s, when she was in her 20s in California, it marked a period in her life when she was having a lot of UFO sightings. And one night, driven by curiosity, about life beyond Earth, she openly invited any listening aliens to make contact. So she went into a meditation type of state and said, "Hey, if you want to hang out, I'm here. Let's have a good time." And then just 4 months later, so she gives out this invitation. And then 4 months later, while resting in a friend's car, she experienced a high frequency sound and encountered three beings with a triangular shaped silver head. And these aliens, she recalls, observed her intently and even touched her, imparting a profound sense of benevolence and light. If this sighting would have taken place, let's say in the 1800s, let's just throwing a number there, anyone could say angels, easy, right? Because you feel this light, you feel this happiness. It's these godlike entities that have these weird shaped heads coming from this craft, but they're amazing, they're beautiful, right? Your interpretation makes a really big difference on your encounters. Obviously, that's how we make memories. So for her, she said this took place in the 70s. They touched me, and we don't really know what that means. But then she's like, she had this sense of benevolence and light from these entities. Yeah, you could easily brush that off as people's understanding of angels. Now, she didn't tell the story until 2023. So that means it's a possibility that in the 70s, she might have been a bit confused about her encounter. But now, with all the interest in UFOs, she's like, you know what? Maybe it was alien. Maybe it was extraterrestrial. Maybe it was interdimensional. The possibilities are endless. And there's a few stories like this. A good amount of people that have conducted meditation to get into contact with UFOs, people refer to it as CE5, but it has been done for centuries. A lot of them have positive experiences because they're inviting the situation. Those that have been allegedly abducted and that didn't invite it, yeah, they're horrid experiences a good amount of the time. So are we dealing with two different types of entities here that don't have the same views and insights or maybe agenda? So her fascination with extraterrestrial life led her to speak with astrophysicists and delve into the mystery of crop circles, further deepening her interest after dreaming of aliens and discovering a new crop circle nearby the next day. I'm gonna make this really short because we just have seriously so much to cover. Crop circles are very controversial. Some think that aliens make them. There are crop circling groups that make crop circles and that have publicly mentioned that they make crop circles. It's touchy. It's difficult. People have said, Christina, comment on crop circles. I don't know if they sound like that, but that's how they sound to my mind. And it's hard. I'm gonna say the majority of them, maybe like 99%, are man-made. Okay, our next one, I have an interview one for you. Talking about Nick Jonas from the Jonas Brothers. They were huge in the like 2010s. Okay, they were just like a boy band. And so he speaks about his UFO sighting in 2015 to Seth Meyers. Let's go ahead and watch that. Oh, just kidding. Let me actually share my screen here to show that to you.
You are on
So
board.
when I was 14, maybe I was in my backyard playing basketball with some friends, and I looked up in the sky, and there was 3 flying saucers.
Really?
So this is Hollywood, and everyone was like, it's a movie set. And I was convinced it was real. And I looked up online, and there was 3 identical sightings in other states.
Wow.
And so I'm a firm believer in aliens,
Gotcha.
and terrestrial life.
That was nice and short. And it's actually going to be a really great preface for our next person that we're going to talk about, because in that interview, Seth Meyers brings that up because Nick Jonas and Demi Lovato are really close friends during this time frame in 2015, and I don't know if they're still close, but Demi Lovato has always had an interest in UFOs, ghosts. She even talks about mermaids, and they mentioned that in that particular interview when Seth says, "What do you think about mermaids?" And Nick is like, "No, total BS. I don't believe in mermaids." That point's irrelevant, but Demi Lovato is the center of that conversation. So it's going to bring us into our next one. Before we do that, I had to just quickly do some math. So Nick Jonas had that sighting in 2014. The show took place in 2015. That means that he's had his encounter in 2011. Why am I bringing this up? Because he said, "Oh, as soon as I had the sighting, I quickly went to the internet." While the internet has been going on since the 90s, it became very prevalent where it became more prominent in people's homes. 2010, 2011, 2012. I didn't get mine until 2012 in my house. But this, I thought, more people, younger people that have kind of been saturated with the UFO phenomenon, as quickly as they encounter something, they whip out their phones, they go home, they go on the computer and see if anything strange has happened in the area. We're going to see that another time with another celebrity that had a recent sighting. Recent, I'm saying the last, like since the year 2000 onward, because now more than ever, it's a lot easier to quickly debunk a sighting with an airplane, a rocket, a missile, and who knows what, right? Back in the day, it was more of guesswork. It took a long time to hear back from maybe like the weather station or from the government. It took days, if not weeks. Now you can do it immediately. And this is really, really awesome practice. Getting into our next person, which is Demi Lovato, I'm going to share my screen here and let's watch this one.
Wow.
And so I'm a firm believer in aliens.
Gotcha.
Terrestrial life.
Here's Demi Lovato.
Have you ever had an experience? This is going to sound so out there, but just bear with me. So I woke up in my room and there was like 3 beings. And they were like, "Do you want to see your planet?" And I was like, "Oh, sorry."
You were like, "Hell yeah."
I was like, "Hell yeah, let's go." So I like whooshed out of my room and was like hovering over the planet. And then all of a sudden they're like, "You want to see our planet?" And I was like, "Hell yeah."
Yeah.
So, I was totally for it. You know what I'm
You said
saying?
hell yes.
So I can't call it like an abduction. I called it an astral projection for a long time because I went somewhere else.
Yeah.
But then I realized maybe this was just an encounter that I had.
Looking at Demi Lovato, the reason to why I put her on the list, not only for this sighting that she had mentioned back in 2021 on the Kelly Clarkson show, which looking at that time frame, 2017, 2024, it's a hot period. But she talks about her UFO sighting. This went viral for her, so much so that she ended up creating a docu-series called Unidentified with Demi Lovato, where she was traveling with her sister Dallas and her best friend to travel certain parts of the United States and to look better into the UFO phenomenon. She's also mentioned on the Howard Stern show that just like Goldie, she has invited extraterrestrials to hang out, like where she goes into a meditation and she says, "Hey, if you want to hang out, we can hang out." This when we're dealing with this, not everyone agrees with meditation and inviting extraterrestrials because sometimes you don't know what you're inviting. It's the same thing like with Ouija boards. Now, some will say it's the best experience of their life. I am not going to tell you one way or the other, but not everyone has had a positive experience, and that goes for anything in life. It's not a cookie cutter recipe. It's not going to work for everyone. When Howard Stern asked her, "Oh, was it like a transcendental meditation?" She's like, "No, it's just kind of more of like a meditation, but an invitation." And I have a lot of questions with this. Not that if it works or not. Putting that aside, let's say it does work. All right. Let's just say that every time you do a meditation to invite aliens, which is interdimensionals and extraterrestrials, let's say it works. And I want to hear your thoughts on this because my ideas have changed a lot over the last few years. And this is important to talk about. What gives us the right, number one, to say, "Hey, yeah, if you want to hang out, you can come on my time"? Like, I just find that bizarre. Number two, and maybe you can answer my questions because these are just like questions coming out of my mind. Next question is like, I just feel it's more authoritative almost of, "Oh yeah, let's hang out, not on your time, but let me do it." Or is it kind of like intuition where you can put things out into the universe like people say and then you can get back what you ask for? Do you see the conflict in my mind? And maybe I'm not vocalizing it properly, at least not yet. Give me maybe a few days, but hopefully you can attempt to understand the contradicting thoughts I'm having in my mind of how it works. Or am I looking too deep into it? Am I thinking too much for this? And it should just be super duper simple. Have you tried it? Can you answer any of my questions? Because that's what this channel and this show and this episode is all about. It's talking about it back and forth because we are figuring this out together. I do not have all the answers. I am seeking questions. My cup literally says questions in progress, which, by the way, you can get this if you are a Patreon supporter. It's a really sick cup. It just came in the mail, by the way. And it says question everything. Don't take things as the gospel. All right. Ask questions, and my questions are always in progress. Also, I'm drinking some very sugary coffee. Getting into our next one here, talking about Fran Dresser. I don't know why I said Frasier, but from The Nanny. And this is crazy, actually. I have never heard of this. Coming from a celebrity, number one, I had no idea that Fran had a UFO alien kind of encounter, and it's wacky. So if you're standing up, sit down, get some popcorn, get something nice from the kitchen or something, because this story is wild. Because she claims that her and her ex-husband were abducted by aliens who planted chips in their hands, and their encounter and their marriage was predestined by aliens. It's already wacky. Let's get more into this. Because the star of The Nanny tells the Huffington Post that in her younger years, she was abducted by aliens. She said, quote, it's funny because Peter and I both saw aliens before we saw each other doing the same thing, driving on the road with our dads, in all seriousness. And she was referring to her ex-husband and her happily divorced producer and writer, Peter Mark Jacobson. And she continues, quote, we were both in junior high. A few years later, we met and we realized that we had the exact same experience. I think that somehow we were programmed to meet. We both have scars in the exact same place with the exact same kind of scar, which is wacky. And then she says that even though she has these thoughts, her ex-husband Jacobson doesn't believe that the scar came from aliens. He thinks she got a scar from a drill bit or a hot cup of coffee and doesn't remember how she got that scar or how he got that scar. But for myself, just listen to this testimony at the very least, for them to have so many similarities, seeing a UFO with their dads on the road, having a scar in the exact same place. Is it just a coincidence? Are we conspiracy theorists here? I don't think so. I think there could be something to it because it's weird. How many people, just right off the bat, because you might think, Christina, you're out of your mind. Just think about this just for a second, because I like to rationalize things because that's super important. How many times have you encountered someone that has a scar in the same place as you? Maybe even has a birthmark in the same place as you. Maybe has had, at the very least, the same kind of injury from the same activity. That one, it'll be a little bit easier to find, right? But to find a scar, the same kind of scar in the exact same place for two people to have the exact same one, it's a rarity. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you're really pushing it to say it's a coincidence. And if I'm wrong, and if you have the stats, let me know in the comments. Let me know in the live chat. That's totally okay. I want to be proven wrong. Okay, that's fine. But provide me the stats if you think, nah, it's just a coincidence. Do coincidences even exist? I'm going to leave that one there because now we're getting into our musicians, and Elvis Presley is a crazy one. He's had a handful of UFO encounters. Apparently, he was also a UFO fanatic. And what's crazy about Elvis Presley is that there are a handful of books that put the connections between Elvis Presley and UFOs. So let's get into this one. And I gotta speed through these because it's believed that Elvis has had several UFO sightings during his life with this interest. which sparked an unusual sighting with his father, Vernon, on the day he was born back on January 8th, 1935. And so, according to the singer's hairstylist and friend Larry Geller, he says, quote, his father told us he had gone out to have a cigarette at 2 a.m. during the delivery, Elvis's delivery. And when he looked up into the skies above their little shack, he saw the strangest blue light. He knew right then and there that something was special about him. But it gets even weirder. It's really bizarre because additionally, Elvis recounted an experience at the age of 8 when he claimed to have been visited telepathically by aliens, and they purportedly showed him a vision of his future self in a white suit performing for a crowd. And then throughout his adult life, Elvis frequently mentioned observing unusual lights, particularly when traveling through desert areas at night, which he believed to be UFOs. He also, at least according to Luckman's book called Alien Rock and Roll Extraterrestrial Connection, he says that Elvis Presley had about 350 UFO books that he traveled with. Take it or leave it. He's not here. We can't ask him these questions on if that's true or not. But let's say you were lying. Like, why would you lie about having 350 UFO books? I don't even have that many. All right. And I have a lot of books, but I don't have that many. I do not travel with them everywhere I go. Take it or leave it. It's a crazy one. You're probably aware that Mick Jagger has had UFO sightings because, according to the band Showbiz, in 1968, Mick went camping in Glastonbury with his then girlfriend, singer Marianne Faithfull, that's actually a pretty last name, and encountered a rare luminous cigar-shaped mothership. Cigar-shaped, kind of like Muhammad Ali. And then it says here, around the same time, Mick had a UFO detector installed in his British estate, and then the alarm kept on going off whenever he left his home, indicating the presence of strong electromagnetic activity in the imminent area. I need one of those. And this took place in the 60s and 70s. Goals. He also mentioned that he had a UFO sighting over a crowd during the Rolling Stones' infamous 1969 concert in California. Crazy stuff. Now we're getting into John Lennon. This one's a pretty famous one. If you are familiar with it, bear with me. I have a few that you probably don't know about. So John Lennon had a strange experience, and it was relayed by ex-girlfriend May Pang. And she explained that John was lying in bed, and then he decided to go out to the balcony for a cigarette on a summer's evening. And as he was smoking, he noticed an odd light flashing. And then as he turned, he saw this silent circular object, dark in color and adorned with white pulsating lights around the rim, with one red light on top. So standing on the balcony, John shouted for May to come and confirm the sighting. And then she later wrote that the large circular object was overhead with, take a guess, with no noise. And then she started yelling, "Oh my goodness, it's a UFO." And so she described that it was 2 or 3 stories above them and just cleared the rooftop of the next building. And the saucer, she described it as crawling past at a very slow pace before turning sideways and floating down the river. And then when it hovered above a building before heading towards Brooklyn, which is really bizarre, and then after stopping short over a bridge, it flew upwards into the sky. So we're seeing a lot of movement with this object. Is it a weather balloon? I don't think so, at least not according to this case. Okay. When he had this encounter, it was so profound that he actually wrote it in his song lyrics, because it says here, the sighting had come just after John had finished his work on the album Walls and Bridges, and he added a note to the inner sleeve that read, "On the 23rd of August 1974 at 9 o'clock, I saw a UFO. There's a UFO over New York, and I ain't too surprised." And that was in the song Nobody Told Me, which was released in 1984. Here's the crazy thing about this, and again, I'm trying to speed through these, but according to Sky News, adding to the fascination of this encounter, Uri Geller, who you're familiar with, and I don't want to explain, shares a vibrant tale involving John Lennon because after he had an encounter, he immediately calls Uri and he says, "Hey, I gotta see you. I gotta show you something. I have to tell you something. When can we meet?" And Uri's like, "Dude, like, chill, buddy. It's something crazy." And he says, "Please, please, please." So they end up meeting up. Lennon is telling his encounter to Uri Geller, and he's like, kind of skeptical. And then this is the crazy part of the story. John Lennon puts his hand in his pocket, grabs something, pulls it out, shows Geller. Geller's eyes get so big, and he's like, "What is this in your hand?" And Lennon says, "It's some kind of egg that was given to me by aliens. Take it or leave it." It's so crazy. And then so Geller ended up telling the story to the public about how bizarre it was. And Geller claims that this egg is an extraterrestrial rock given to him by Lennon. Take it or leave it. It's a crazy story, I know. But let's get into our next one here because we simply cannot talk about UFOs and extraterrestrials and aliens without talking about David Bowie. Let me just name you some songs that he's written: Space Oddity, Starman, Life on Mars, Hello Space Boy, Dancing Out in Space, and Born in a UFO. This man was one of the most influential musicians that got people talking about UFOs. Also, he had Ziggy Stardust, one of his characters for a certain period in his career, where he told people he was an alien and then was singing music in his outfit, his makeup, his costume, and everything. He opened so many people's minds to just the very least the possibility of life beyond Earth during a time frame when no one knew about exoplanets. We only knew about planets in our solar system. The first exoplanet wasn't found until the 1990s. Bowie was way ahead of his time in so many ways, always pushing the envelope, always jumping off the ledge really when it came to his career. And he had mentioned in Cream, which is a Rolling Stone magazine in 1975, he said, quote, "I used to work for two guys who put out a UFO magazine in England about 6 years ago, and I made sightings 6-7 times a night for about a year when I was in the observatory." 6 to 7 sightings a year in the observatory, just casually, just doing his thing, looking at the nice stars, and bam, he sees something that's just moving a little too fast, maybe a little too slow, and he's like, "That's a UFO." So much so, it was so influential in his life that he had to contribute to a UFO magazine in England. That shows passion right there, because writing, number one, isn't for everyone. And then magazines, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Okay. All right. Next one. This one is Zayn Malik from One Direction. His story is really short, actually, because according to the Glamour magazine in 2016, he told Glamour and he said the reason to why he left One Direction is because an alien contacted him in a dream to tell him to leave. And then he left. And then right after leaving One Direction, he had a song hit that like flew up the charts. I don't think I'm using the right lingo, but you know what I mean, right after leaving. So that kind of set him for a few years after that, which is great, which I think is interesting. Now we have Kesha, and I have a video for you for this one. The audio isn't fantastic, so just put up your speakers a little bit for this next one. But this is her telling her experience when it comes to UFOs.
I did, yes. Okay, okay. I go camping a lot. That's like my favorite thing. So part of like my inspiration, I think, for especially the album art, and you'll see for even more of the album art, I'm not going to give away too much, but has been that I like had an experience with UFO when I was in Joshua Tree and I was camping, and we're just like sitting on a rock, and all of a sudden there were fireballs in the sky. And for the longest time, my boyfriend and I were just sitting there and we were just looking at them, and like we were trying to figure out like all these like really rational reasons.
So at least you had a witness.
No,
right?
and he's very rational. Very rational guy. And I was like, am I just like, are you seeing this? And he's like, yeah, I'm seeing it. And I was like, because like I could definitely just, I don't know. Am I just making is this
Right.
Yeah, mind
am
blown.
I just and he was like, no, they're like fireballs in the sky. And so we were like looking up online if there was some sort of art festival where there were fake UFOs or like a mountain or something that had fires on them that could look. We did everything that we could think of that could be like a rational explanation for these like fireballs in the sky. And then they like went away and then we kind of forgot about them. And then like a couple hours later, they came back. And I was like, there those aliens are. Those damn aliens, but in a different formation. So, and they were like moving around. And I was like, those aren't fires because fires don't just move around. And they were different formations. And I was like, okay. And I've always kind of like been a believer.
All right, there's that one. With her, she ended up making a bunch of music talking about UFOs and like aliens and stuff, especially in her album called Rainbow, where it has a few flying saucers in her album cover. She also wrote a song about a flying saucer. I listened to it, and the biggest takeaway was that she was waiting for the flying saucer to pick her up from Earth because that's where she's from. That's how the song went. What was the meaning behind it? I don't know. Artists, they're confusing. But here she mentioned back in this was what 2017. She said that, yeah, she had a really strange encounter and she had someone with her, and because of that experience that she had, it influenced her album, it influenced her music, but it also changed the way that she wanted to continue her career as an artist. And that just demonstrates how influential that is. And you could take it or leave it. You might be like, oh, she's kind of a publicity stunt or something, and it's a possibility. But what we've seen it with Demi Lovato, we've seen it with Miley Cyrus, we're seeing it with Kesha, and the list goes on and on. People that have had UFO encounters or sightings, it stays with them for a very long period of time, and for her, it changed her career soon after. No filter, thank you for that. And Dennis says David Bowie is probably one of those people that I mentioned knew the answer and knew he could never speak about it. That's interesting. People have had that idea before. Android says Kesha's paranormal show was terrible. It had a lot of negative reviews. I did look into it before doing today's show, and I thought maybe I should cover this. And I'm like, no, the reviews are not that good. Also, it wasn't UFO related, but she also does have an interest in the paranormal as well. Loki says that he knew who Uri Geller was during a trivia contest and he won a bottle of wine. Nice, because trivia is the best. It's so much fun, and I'm so glad that you knew who it was. I'm going to touch on this because I did mention Miley Cyrus, and Dutch says she saw a UFO. The reason to why I didn't bring her up for a full-blown segment in today's show is just because she might have been under the influence. She doesn't know, and I thought it's not spellbinding to go ahead and share that if you were under some kind of substance. But a lot of people have taken that and have mentioned that she had a UFO encounter. She feels like she did. She feels like it was very real and not what she had ingested. But when you're dealing with intoxicants, right, it just becomes, it loses a lot of the credibility. So I didn't really want to cover it, but I just did want to throw a name out there. Now we're getting into Kendrick Lamar. He's a rapper he's a rapper that claimed to have had an encounter with the UFO in his youth, and he mentioned that in the Howard Stern show back in 2014. So like right before people were talking about it, he was ahead of the game, because he says, quote, I seen that when I was 6 years old. My mother still doesn't believe me, and he was in Campton, and we was on our little balcony on the stairway. She was sitting drinking a little bit of champagne or wine. I'll never forget. And it was just a dart, a flash, like a ch-ch-ch-ch-ch. Not the flash like it's a shooting star, but multiple flashes was in the sky. I've never forgot that. And that was my encounter. And to this day, I know there is something else out there. I'm going to stand my ground to this. Yes, I did. Nobody believed me then, and they don't believe me now. It's just something that I can't really describe because it just sounds like, okay, you saw a dart go past, but that doesn't make any sense. I remember this, and words can't describe it. It's just a surreal moment. And then when Howard Stern's co host had asked Kendrick Lamar if he thought that he was abducted, he says, I probably was. That's probably why I'm doing music right now. Who knows? They probably gave me the energy, you know? That's pretty weird. I just think that it's weird to give your, credentials saying, "Oh, I'm probably doing this because aliens abducted me and told me to do so." Let's back that up just for a second. There have been a handful of people that have been allegedly abducted that were given a message, that were given a purpose to come back to Earth and to help the Earth in any way that they can. There's a handful of stories. There's probably one that comes to mind to you. Could this have been the case with Kendrick Lamar as well? Your call. Your call on that one. He's a pretty famous rapper. You're probably familiar with the few of his songs. You've, at the very least, have heard it on the radio at least once, or some kind of area where they're always playing pop music. You've heard his music. I have one more for you, and this one's of Post Malone. He did an interview with the Joe Rogan Experience in 2020, and let's go ahead and play that. If you're enjoying the show, hit that like button right down below. Are there any people that we covered that you didn't know had a UFO sighting? Please let me know who that celebrity was in the live chat and in the comments, as I do try my absolute best to read all of the comments. When we're looking at Post Malone, he had his encounter when he was 16 years old. This is a very impressionable time in anyone's life, and the encounters that they have stick with them forever. So for him to have such an interesting encounter, not just with him but also with his cousins, it's worth mentioning. And he was able to talk about this back in 2020 on the Joe Rogan Experience, going into some detail on what he saw. But he also saw some strange things in California, because California is a UFO hotspot, and if you live in California or want to visit it, I have part 1 and part 2 of the Mysteries of California, covering everything strange and weird and a bunch of UFO sightings when it comes to that state. You can find it right here on this channel. I think that a lot of people that have UFO sightings brings a question inside of me on why did they have a sighting versus someone else? Is it predestined? Were they chosen to have a UFO sighting? I started asking this question actually when I had a Japanese researcher by the name of Norio Hayakawa, and he brought this up, and I said, what if? What if? And, just talking to people at the very least opens your mind to what they think, and maybe things that you didn't consider. So if you've had a UFO sighting, you've probably asked yourself, why did I see that? What did it provide me for my life? Why did I see it, but the person right next to me didn't? You see what I mean? So when we're looking at celebrities, why have so many of them? We're looking at hundreds of people have had UFO sightings. Is it because they were in the right place at the right time? Because some of these took place in deserts, but also in California. A lot of celebrities live in California for Hollywood and who knows whatever else. Is it just because they were in the right location? Or is it because it was decided for them to have a sighting, for them to speak out about it in order to help push UFO transparency? Is disclosure going to be coming from aliens themselves? Because it ain't coming from the government. Prove me wrong. I don't think so. I do not think it'll be coming from them. It'll be coming from the people. And then people that watch these shows say, I don't think it's going to come from you and I, but maybe from the aliens themselves. ET, interdimensional. When I use the word alien, I'm referring to that. So is that why these celebrities are giving kind of the inside to these things? Maybe more so than your average person. Does that make sense? Like, am I conveying that properly? Please let me know in the live chat. Let me know in the comments. All work, low pay says catastrophic disclosure 2024. Let's go. And William, thank you for that. Thank you. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please let's go ahead and answer these right before we end today's show so I can spend a few extra minutes with you, hopefully answering your questions to the best of my ability. While you're doing that, answer my question. Out of the celebrities that we covered, which one was your favorite? Which one? I already asked you which one you didn't know about, but now let me ask you which one was your favorite? Like, which case was the most compelling to you? For me, it was always it's enjoyable to hear Shaquille O'Neal's sighting with all the sound effects. It's engaging, right? He's a great storyteller. So that one I think for myself is fantastic. Yeah, Russell Crowe had a UFO sighting. He did. We just do not have the time to cover it. But there's a few that I missed, like Dan Aykroyd had one. Yes, we have Russell Crowe as well, Jimi Hendrix. These are some cases that people are so familiar with that I thought maybe I shouldn't cover these. But there's also we just don't have the time for it as well. All Work says Ali was his favorite. Keith says that Kurt Russell was his favorite. Nice. That is super exciting. Those are pretty good. Marty says, Christina, you make perfect sense. Thank goodness. I was starting to get kind of sweaty. So I'm glad. I'm glad I made a little bit of sense. Annie says Kurt Russell was her favorite. Marty says John Lennon is always my favorite. Ron says Muhammad Ali, Muhammad Ali, hands down. Robert says Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell's kind of winning this one. No Filter says Shaq. Nice. Rome says I did like Shaq's testimony. John Lennon says Cat. Crit says Kurt Russell. Paul says love Shaq. Nice. Moon Kurt. Lennon says all work. Lord says Kurt Russell. He's becoming number one. Like Kurt Russell is number one for you guys. Dennis says Zayn Malik from One Direction. Okay. I thought that was kind of cool as well. Tyler says Ali. Loki says Ali was good because of the time. Good point. Good point. Tony says, John Lennon, if he actually had the artifact. I feel you on that one. Star says Shaq. Nice. Shaq as well. Thank you, everyone, for answering my questions and telling me which one was your favorite or even which one you didn't know about. Before you head out, hit that like button right down below. Subscribe if you haven't already, as we do 3 live shows right here on this channel. And if you want behind the scenes, the chaos, extra UFO commentary, and even free merch like this awesome cup, you can be a Patreon supporter starting off for free. That link is below, but also here is the QR code for it as well. That will take you to all of my social media links, my website where I write articles for all of my shows, and Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Discord. You can find it all right here when you just scan this QR code with your phone if you are watching this on your computer or if you're watching this on your TV. Before you head out, this is like really awesome news, okay? Because Cosmic Portals, my space ambient music channel, the album has just come out today. Like today. So you can find it across all social media platforms. Just type in Cosmic Portals and it will pop right up, an album with over 20 tracks. Do take a look at that. It was really exciting to make. And if you need help falling asleep, relaxing, or using your mind to wander the universe, Cosmic Portals is going to be your best friend. That is it for today. I will see you tomorrow for Mysteries with the History at 2:30 p.m. PST. Be safe, and remember, keep your eyes on the skies.